Former Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed had been working as a freelance security consultant in Savannah, Georgia, for 14 months since leaving the Navy SEALs. At 36 years old, Marcus hadn't retired due to physical injury or catastrophic mission failure. He left because after 14 years of high-stakes operations across multiple theaters, he recognized he was becoming increasingly paranoid and hyper-vigilant in civilian environments and needed to step away before those PTSD symptoms became unmanageable. The decision was preventive rather than reactive, walking away from the brotherhood and purpose that defined his entire adult life before the psychological damage became irreversible. Research showed that trauma-focused treatments for PTSD had average dropout rates of 27.1% among enlisted service members, with studies showing that only 9.1% of veterans completed evidence-based psychotherapies under typical conditions, an attrition rate exceeding 60%. Marcus had recognized his symptoms early and made the difficult choice to leave before reaching crisis points that made treatment less effective. Now, he conducted security assessments for small businesses, worked alone to minimize interpersonal stress, and maintained careful distance from situations that might trigger his combat stress responses. His companion was Scout, a 5-month-old German Shepherd puppy Marcus adopted 6 weeks ago from a service dog training program washout. Scout had failed early behavioral assessments for being overly reactive to environmental stresses. Basically, the puppy exhibited anxiety in chaotic environments with loud noises and sudden movements. The training program rejected him as unsuitable for service work that demanded confidence and composure from the start. But Marcus saw something different. A young dog exhibiting normal puppy anxiety that rigorous programs eliminated because service work demanded immediate performance. German Shepherds were renowned for their intelligence, loyalty, strong work ethic, and protective nature, making them ideal for military working dog programs and service work when they exhibited appropriate temperament. Marcus took Scout as a rehabilitation project, something to care for that didn't involve tactical operations, something innocent that needed patience and understanding rather than mission-critical performance. On a busy Saturday evening at 19:30 hours, when Savannah's historic district filled with weekend crowds, Marcus was having dinner at a popular waterfront restaurant, seated in a corner booth that provided clear sightlines to all exits. Old habits from SEAL training that civilian life hadn't erased despite 14 months of deliberate practice. Scout was lying quietly under the table in his service dog-in-training vest, while Marcus worked on public socialization and obedience training in controlled environments. The restaurant was crowded with weekend dinner, crowds, families celebrating occasions, couples on romantic dates, tourists enjoying the riverfront atmosphere, and Savannah's famous Southern hospitality. At a nearby table, approximately 12 feet away, sat a couple in their late 30s, exhibiting behavior. Marcus's threat assessment training immediately flagged as problematic. The man spoke loudly and aggressively to their waitress about every perceived service failure. The woman added condescending comments about the restaurant's quality, and both displayed the entitled body language Marcus had learned to read during years of hostage negotiations and threat assessment. People who believed their status exempted them from social norms. The waitress, a young woman approximately early 20s named Sarah, according to her name tag, was clearly struggling. She was apologetic, nervous, doing her absolute best to accommodate escalating demands while managing 4 other tables during peak dinner rush service. Marcus recognized the pattern from security reports he'd read about increasing workplace violence in hospitality. Research showed that 64% of restaurant workers experienced some form of workplace violence during their careers, with incidents rising significantly in recent years. This couple was exhibiting classic pre-violence indicators that Marcus's training had taught him to recognize. Progressive demands escalating without satisfaction, hostile body language intensifying, verbal abuse escalating toward physical confrontation. When Sarah brought their entrees after a reasonable wait time, the man inspected his seafood with theatrical disgust designed to humiliate. "This is completely unacceptable. The shrimp are overcooked. Do you even know what properly cooked seafood looks like? Are you competent to do this job?" Sarah apologized profusely with genuine distress, immediately offered to have it re-prepared properly. The woman added her complaints with equal disdain. "And my wine is warm. This entire meal is a disaster. We shouldn't have to pay for this incompetence." Marcus watched from his booth with increasing concern, his SEAL training recognizing escalation patterns that matched pre-violence indicators. Research showed that 88% of hospitality workers experienced verbal abuse from customers, and 17% reported being physically assaulted during their careers. This situation was tracking toward the violent 17% rather than remaining in the verbal 88%. The couple's behavior showed progressive escalation without de-escalation attempts. Marcus considered intervening but hesitated. He'd left the SEALs specifically to avoid high-stress confrontations that triggered his hypervigilance and PTSD symptoms. Not his business, not his responsibility, and getting involved would mean confronting exactly what he was trying to manage. Then, the situation escalated dramatically. Sarah returned approximately 8 minutes later with replacement dishes, navigating carefully through the crowded restaurant during peak service with focused concentration. Scout, being a 5-month-old puppy, still learning public behavior and spatial awareness, shifted position under Marcus's table. His movement caused Sarah to adjust her path slightly to avoid stepping on him. As she approached the couple's table with adjusted trajectory, the man suddenly stood and deliberately blocked her path, causing Sarah to stop abruptly. The sudden stop caused wine to slosh from glasses on her tray. The woman shrieked dramatically and stood with exaggerated outrage. The man's face twisted with rage, disproportionate to the situation. Sarah immediately apologized with genuine horror. "I'm so sorry. The puppy moved and I had to adjust my path. Let me get towels immediately. We'll cover any cleaning costs." But the couple wasn't interested in apologies, explanations, or reasonable solutions to a minor accident. The man shoved Sarah hard with both hands against her shoulders, using enough force that she stumbled backward several feet, the tray falling and crashing into furniture behind her with loud impact. "You clumsy incompetent! That wine costs more per glass than you make in an hour. You're going to pay for ruining our evening." Sarah was on the ground, clearly hurt and frightened, trying to apologize while backing away from continued threat. But the man advanced on her aggressively, standing over her in a threatening posture that Marcus's extensive training recognized as immediate precursor to further violence. The woman joined in, with vicious intensity. "And there's a dog in this restaurant. That's a health violation. Whose filthy animal is that?" Scout, hearing the loud commotion and sensing distress in the environment, poked his head out anxiously from under Marcus's table. A 5-month-old puppy in a training vest, ears back, clearly anxious from the shouting and crashing sounds that triggered his environmental reactivity. The man noticed Scout, and his aggression found a new target. "That's the animal that caused this. Your dog ruined our meal." He moved towards Scout with obvious hostile intent, approaching rapidly with raised hand as if to strike the puppy. That's when Marcus's combat instincts overrode his careful civilian detachment and his deliberate avoidance of confrontation. In the 2 seconds before the man reached Scout with clear intent to harm a 5-month-old puppy, Marcus was out of his booth and positioned protectively between them, intercepting the man's advance with controlled presence that communicated unmistakable capability without using force yet. "Stop," Marcus said with the calm authority that came from years commanding operators in hostile environments. "He's a service dog in training, 5 months old. Your waitress adjusted her path because he moved. That's normal puppy behavior we're working on correcting. You shoved her hard enough to knock her down and cause visible injuries. That's assault under Georgia law. You're now approaching a trainee service animal with apparent intent to harm him. That's animal cruelty under Georgia Code 16-12-4. I'm a witness. So is everyone in this restaurant recording this on their phones." Marcus gestured subtly to at least 8 diners holding up smartphones, filming the confrontation. A common response in modern restaurant environments where research showed 40% of customers reported witnessing staff abuse. The couple's aggression confronted documentation and witness testimony in real time. The man tried to advance past Marcus toward Sarah, who was still on the ground assessing her injuries. Marcus maintained protective position without touching the man, using spatial control techniques from close-quarters combat training that created physical barriers without contact. "She's injured from your assault. You shoved her. Move toward her again, and it becomes aggravated assault under Georgia Code 16-521. You shoved a waitress during dinner service. Approximately 200 witnesses in this restaurant. Multiple video recordings from different angles. Georgia law is very clear about assault in public spaces. Step back. Now." The man's face flushed with rage and visible calculation. He was being blocked by someone clearly trained and comfortable with confrontation, recorded by multiple witnesses, and his assault on Sarah was documented from numerous perspectives. He tried one final play at dominance and intimidation. "You have no authority here. I'll have you arrested for threatening me. Do you know who I am? My attorney will destroy you." Marcus's response was delivered with SEAL precision and legal knowledge. "I'm retired Navy SEAL. I documented this incident with the same attention to detail I used writing operational after-action reports for federal investigations. You shoved a restaurant employee hard enough to knock her down and cause her to drop a tray. That's simple assault. Georgia Code 16-520. You advanced on her while she was on the ground in a threatening manner. That's aggravated assault. Georgia Code 16-521. You approached a service dog in training with apparent intent to harm. That's animal cruelty. Georgia Code 16-12-4. And violation of federal ADA provisions for service animals in training. 8 people recorded it, from multiple angles. I'll wait while you call your attorney. I've testified in federal court 17 times during counter-terrorism prosecutions. I'm very comfortable explaining to law enforcement exactly what happened here using precise legal terminology, timestamps, and witness coordination. The restaurant manager arrived rapidly, having been alerted by multiple staff members witnessing the assault and its aftermath. Marcus provided his detailed account using military precision, comprehensive timeline of events, specific legal code violations with statute numbers, accurate witness count, available video documentation from 8 sources. Sarah, still on the ground with visible bruising forming and obvious pain, confirmed Marcus's version with trembling voice. Multiple diners immediately volunteered to provide video evidence and written witness statements. The manager asked the couple to leave immediately, or he was calling police without further discussion. The man made one final attempt at intimidation and dominance. "You're making a huge mistake. I'm Richard Hartwell, partner at Hartwell & Associates, one of the largest law firms in Georgia. My wife is Amanda Hartwell, daughter of State Senator Hartwell. We have resources and connections you can't imagine. This isn't over. You'll all regret this." Marcus's response was calm, but loaded with the authority of someone who'd faced far more dangerous threats in operational environments. "Call your attorney. Call the police. Call the senator. I prevented you from assaulting an injured restaurant employee on the ground and potentially harming a 5-month-old service dog puppy. That's defense of another, specifically legal under Georgia law. You committed assault and battery on restaurant staff, witnessed and recorded by dozens of people. Every person here documented it from multiple angles. I'm former Naval Special Warfare with extensive federal court testimony experience. Your resources and connections don't concern me because documentation, witnesses, and law matter more than wealth in criminal proceedings." The Hartwells calculated rapidly. They were recorded committing assault by multiple witnesses, confronted by a veteran with obvious credibility and legal knowledge, surrounded by a restaurant full of people displaying obvious disapproval and disgust, and their assault on Sarah was documented from multiple angles with timestamps. They exited rapidly without paying their substantial bill, threatening lawsuits and consequences as they left. But the incident didn't end there. Within 72 hours, the Hartwells leveraged their considerable connections systematically. Richard used his law firm's substantial resources to file comprehensive complaints against the restaurant for health code violations related to the service dog puppy, against Sarah for deliberately causing the wine spill, and against Marcus for threatening behavior and illegally representing an untrained dog as a service animal. Amanda used her father's political connections to pressure the health department about service dog policies in restaurants, leveraging State Senator Hartwell's influence. The restaurant owner, a veteran named Thomas Chen, who'd served in the Army for 6 years, contacted Marcus with concern. The Hartwells are using political and legal connections to pressure everyone involved. They're threatening extensive lawsuits unless we terminate Sarah and ban you from the property permanently. They've filed police reports claiming you threatened Richard with violence. I have video footage from security cameras showing he assaulted Sarah, and you intervened without using any physical force. But they have expensive attorneys and political connections throughout Georgia. This could escalate significantly. Marcus's first instinct was to withdraw completely. He'd left the SEALs specifically to avoid confrontations that triggered his PTSD, hypervigilance, and the paranoia he was working hard to manage. Studies showed that veterans with PTSD who used service dogs experienced significantly lower symptom severity, with the service dog group scoring 41.9 versus 51.7 on standardized PTSD measures compared to control groups. But Marcus's service dog training with Scout was still in early stages, and confrontation like this could set back his careful management of symptoms. But Thomas added detail that fundamentally changed Marcus's calculation. Sarah is a 23-year-old single mother working 2 jobs to support her infant daughter. She has visible bruising on her shoulders and back from being shoved into furniture. She's terrified of losing this job because the Hartwells threatened to blacklist her from hospitality work throughout Savannah. She didn't do anything wrong. She adjusted her path because your puppy moved. They used it as manufactured excuse to assault her, and now they're using wealth and connections to punish everyone who witnessed their crime and documented it. Marcus realized this was the fundamental test of whether his retirement meant anything beyond relocated convenience and avoidance. The Hartwells represented exactly the kind of unchecked abuse of power he'd spent 14 years fighting overseas, just manifesting in restaurants instead of combat zones, targeting service workers instead of civilians in war zones, using money and connections instead of weapons. But fundamentally the same. Powerful people hurting vulnerable people because they could, because systems protected them, because witnesses looked away. Marcus made a decision that required confronting the hypervigilance and stress responses he'd left service to manage. He wasn't withdrawing, not settling quietly, and not allowing wealthy, connected people to destroy a young mother's livelihood because they'd assaulted her, and he documented it. Over 3 weeks, the situation escalated systematically. The Hartwells used their law firm's substantial resources to threaten everyone involved with aggressive legal action. They pressured the health department about service dog policies using political connections. They filed civil lawsuits seeking substantial damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. They used media connections to plant coordinated stories portraying themselves as victims of an aggressive veteran with PTSD and a dangerous, untrained dog. Marcus responded by organizing the defense using skills from military operations. He systematically collected video footage from 8 diners who recorded the assault from different angles. He provided detailed, written statements using SEAL operational reporting standards with timestamps and precise legal terminology. He connected Sarah with pro bono legal representation through veteran legal aid organizations. He contacted veteran advocacy organizations who recognize this as harassment of both a veteran and a service worker. He documented the Hartwells pattern using research showing that 64% of restaurant workers experienced workplace violence during their careers, and that incidents like this were increasingly common as entitled customers believed they could abuse staff without consequences. Research supported Marcus's documentation. Studies showed that 88% of hospitality workers experienced verbal abuse from customers, 48% faced customer aggression, and nearly half of all hospitality worker fatalities were caused by violent acts. The Hartwells' behavior fit documented patterns of escalating workplace violence in service industries. The turning point came when local media outlets, having initially been fed the Hartwells' carefully crafted narrative about being victimized, received the actual unedited video footage showing Richard shoving Sarah with force, advancing on her while she was injured on the ground, approaching Scout with hostile intent, and Marcus intervening with controlled de-escalation using absolutely no physical force. The story transformed dramatically once evidence contradicted the Hartwells' claims. Wealthy couple assaults, waitress protecting service puppy, veteran intervenes to prevent further violence. Public reaction was immediate and severe. The video went viral with millions of views across multiple platforms. The Hartwells faced intense social media backlash. Richard's law firm received hundreds of complaints from current and potential clients. Senator Hartwell faced uncomfortable questions about his daughter's conduct and whether his political influence was being used to protect criminals. Critically, other restaurant workers throughout Savannah came forward with documented stories of the Hartwells' pattern of abusing service staff with complete impunity because wealth and connections had always prevented accountability. Research showed this was common. 64% of restaurant workers experienced workplace violence, but wealthy perpetrators rarely faced consequences. Savannah Police Department reviewed all evidence comprehensively and charged Richard Hartwell with simple assault under Georgia Code 16-5-20 for shoving Sarah. The Health Department investigation found no violations. Scout was legitimately in service dog training status under Georgia and federal ADA provisions. The Hartwells' aggressive civil lawsuits were dismissed by a judge who noted pointedly in the written ruling, "Video evidence from 8 independent sources clearly shows the plaintiffs initiated unprovoked assault on restaurant staff. Defendants' intervention was measured, controlled, and lawful under Georgia Defense of Was and other statutes." This lawsuit appears to be retaliatory harassment against individuals who prevented animal cruelty and documented assault. Continued frivolous litigation may result in sanctions and attorney fee awards. Richard Hartwell faced significant professional consequences. His law firm, facing sustained public pressure and multiple client concerns about being associated with his documented behavior, placed him on unpaid leave pending ethics review by the Georgia Bar. He eventually resigned rather than face formal discipline proceedings that would become public record and affect his law license. Amanda Hartwell's substantial social media presence, previously focused on luxury lifestyle content showcasing designer purchases and expensive vacations, became flooded with thousands of comments about abusing service workers, effectively destroying her influencer career and associated income. Sarah kept her job with overwhelming community support that restored her faith in people. Diners specifically requested her service section, tipped generously, far exceeding standard percentages, and multiple other restaurants offered her positions with better pay and benefits if she wanted to move. Thomas Chen's restaurant saw measurably increased business from supporters who appreciated him backing his staff over wealthy bullies, demonstrating that ethical business practices could be financially rewarding rather than costly. Marcus and Scout became local advocates for service dog training and restaurant worker protection. Marcus began volunteering with organizations addressing the documented rise in hospitality worker violence. The research showing 64% of workers experiencing workplace violence. The 48% facing customer aggression. The reality that nearly half of all hospitality worker fatalities were caused by violent acts rather than accidents. Research on service dogs for veterans with PTSD supported Marcus's own journey. Studies showed that veterans paired with service dogs experienced significantly lower PTSD symptom severity, with the service dog group scoring 41.9 versus 51.7 on standardized measures. Veterans with service dogs also had 66% lower odds of receiving PTSD diagnosis after 3 months of partnership. The service dog group showed lower anxiety, lower depression, and higher psychosocial functioning across multiple measures. Marcus's work with Scout was helping manage his PTSD symptoms while giving him renewed purpose. 1 year later, Marcus was invited to speak at a veteran service dog training event attended by dozens of veterans paired with newly trained service dogs. Asked why he intervened when he'd left the SEALs specifically to avoid confrontation that triggered his PTSD, his answer became widely shared in veteran and service worker advocacy communities. Research shows 64% of restaurant workers experience workplace violence during their careers. I watched a wealthy couple assault a 23-year-old single mother because wine spilled when she adjusted her path around my puppy who moved unexpectedly. She couldn't defend herself against people with attorneys and political connections. Scout was a 5-month-old puppy who washed out of training for environmental anxiety, exactly the vulnerable being bullies target because they can't fight back. Intervening triggered my hypervigilance and PTSD symptoms significantly for weeks afterward. But watching abuse happen because getting involved is uncomfortable would have been worse. Research shows veterans with service dogs have 66% lower odds of PTSD diagnosis after 3 months. Scout is helping me manage symptoms while giving me purpose. Sometimes the most important operations aren't overseas. They're in restaurants where people serving us deserve protection from those who think wealth means they can hurt anyone without consequences, and where vigilance means noticing when assault is happening and deciding that managing your PTSD afterward matters less than preventing someone from being hurt in front of you when you have the training to stop it. The presentation included Scout, now 16 months old, demonstrating advanced obedience and public access skills that proved reactive puppies could become confident service dogs with proper training, patience, and understanding. Research showed that service dogs profoundly catalyze growth among veterans with PTSD through providing emotional support, enhancing interpersonal relationships, reducing social isolation, reshaping core beliefs, and reinforcing sense of purpose. Marcus embodied these findings. Scout's training gave him structure, purpose, and reason to engage with communities he'd been avoiding. 18 months after the incident, Marcus had expanded his volunteer work to include training other veterans in service dog handling and consulting with restaurants about workplace violence prevention policies. He also began speaking at hospitality industry conferences about the 64% of workers experiencing violence and how bystander intervention could save lives when done properly. Sarah completed her education while continuing restaurant work, inspired by community support to pursue social work, helping other young single mothers navigate challenges. The Hartwells largely disappeared from Savannah social circles, their reputation permanently damaged by video evidence of who they were when they thought wealth provided immunity from consequences. 2 years after that Saturday evening, Marcus received recognition from veteran service dog organizations for advocacy work that helped dozens of veterans successfully partner with service dogs and manage PTSD symptoms. Research continued, demonstrating that service dogs significantly reduced PTSD symptoms, with studies showing 75% of the service dog group versus 85% of control groups still meeting PTSD criteria after 3 months, a clinically meaningful improvement. During an interview about his advocacy work, Marcus was asked about the lasting impact of intervening despite his PTSD. His answer captured everything. Leaving the SEALs was preventive. I recognized symptoms early before they became unmanageable. Research shows only 9.1% of veterans complete PTSD treatment under typical conditions, with attrition exceeding 60%. I was trying to be in that 9.1% by avoiding triggers. But watching Sarah get assaulted while I did nothing would have been worse for my symptoms than intervening. Scout taught me that managing PTSD doesn't mean avoiding every difficult situation. It means choosing which battles matter enough to accept the cost. Research shows veterans with service dogs have significantly lower PTSD symptoms and 66% lower odds of diagnosis. Scout is my partner in managing symptoms while engaging meaningfully with the world. The Hartwells had wealth and connections, but they couldn't overcome video evidence and people who refused to accept that money buys immunity from basic decency. Sometimes vigilance means recognizing when violence is about to happen and having the courage to stop it even when it costs you personally. The rude couple who struck a waitress protecting a K-9 puppy learned that wealth and connections couldn't protect them when a vigilant Navy SEAL witnessed their assault, documented it with military precision, and decided that civilian retirement doesn't mean abandoning the responsibility to protect vulnerable people. Proving that sometimes vigilance means recognizing that the 64% of restaurant workers who experience violence deserve witnesses willing to intervene even when it costs something personally, and that the most significant battles happen not on distant battlefields, but in ordinary restaurants where someone has to decide whether comfortable detachment matters more than stopping wealthy, entitled people from assaulting a scared young mother who did nothing wrong except exist in a space where powerful people decided their inconvenience justified violence.